Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining from. Welcome to this webinar from SwiftKanban and Digite, as well as Value Nova. The webinar today is on Kanban and behavioral economics. And let's get the proceeding started. I see the webinar attendee count rapidly sort of going up. We'll get started with introductions and housekeeping, and in the meantime, hopefully we'll have the rest of the people join in as well. All right, so we'll get going with some introductions. I'll give you a quick word about SwiftKanban and Digite, and then I will hand over the presentation to today's main speaker, Masa Maeda. And the talk today is on Kanban and behavioral economics. We will, at the end of the talk by Masa, have a Q&A session, and I'm looking forward to a good Q&A discussion today. Just some housekeeping. The webinar will be recorded, and the slides and the recordings will be made available, so you don't have to be writing notes or get distracted from the webinar. We will take your questions through the Q&A box that should appear on the right side of your screens. If you can enter the questions there, we will take them up at the end. So to get it started on the introductions, as I said, the main speaker today is Dr. Masa Maeda, who's the CEO of Value Nova. I'm quite sure a lot of you already know him. My name is Mahesh Singh, and I'm co-founder and senior vice president of marketing at Digite. Just a little bit about Masa. Masa is a recognized figure in the lean and agile communities. I've known him for nearly 7 years now. He's a very valued thought leader in the lean and agile communities, where he's contributed tremendously with new knowledge. He's known for bringing highly successful Kanban and agile adoptions internationally, inside and outside of the software and IT industries. And by many people, he's considered to be the go-to guy for lean and agile transformation, especially in the Spanish-speaking countries. He's the founder and principal of Value Nova, which is a lean agile coaching and training business. He's also a senior consultant with the Qatar Consortium in their agile practice. He's the founder of the Bay Area Limited Web Society, which is how I met him in the very first time. He's also the co-founder of the Mexico and Panama chapters of the Agile Leadership Network, and in various other communities. He was actually an associate of David Anderson, and he actually translated David's book on Kanban, the Blue Book, into Spanish, and he's done a variety of things in the Silicon Valley as well. He lives now in Salt Lake City, and I know he's close to the mountains thanks to the pictures he posts on social media. And I know that in his spare time he challenges himself in the snow country, backcountry, and also enjoys photography. I will hand over to Masa in just a couple of minutes. A quick word about Digite for those of you who don't know us so very well. We are a company based out of the Bay Area. We are a pioneer in the web-based collaborative products and solutions for geographically distributed teams, based out of Cupertino, California, right in the backyard of Apple, or as I like to say, they're in our backyard. At this point, we have over 700,000 users around the world using our products, which cover Lean, Kanban, Agile ALM, and project portfolio management type of space. And of course, SwiftKanban is our flagship Lean Kanban product. Our product is used in a variety of different applications. Clearly, the high-tech world is the leader in that. So it gets used for software development, IT, ops type of use cases. It also gets used by a number of our customers in non-tech, non-software scenarios like marketing, for example, legal, procurement, HR, and a variety of such functions. You can use it for personal Kanban, which a lot of our users do. And we even have a template there for planning a Thanksgiving party, which is coming up not too far from now. So we get used in a variety of use cases, and we're really known for being a very powerful enterprise portfolio Kanban tool. We provide some of the best, by many accounts, the best set of metrics that sort of adhere to the Kanban method by David. and all of these are available as part of our free trial that's available for you to go try if you want to look at it after this webinar, and if you haven't already done so. And just a quick look at some of the customers that we have around the world, some very large customers, some very small companies, and of course a lot of personal users of Kanban as well. So just a very wide range of customers that use us, and therefore you know, sort of give us feedback on what we should be doing on our product, which we are very we pay a lot of attention to what they tell us in order to build out our product, and we're very sort of proud about that. After that short introduction, let me just go ahead and hand over this to Masa. Masa, I'm going to make you presenter here. Just give me a second.
Thank you.
And Masa, a very warm welcome to you. We're meeting after some gap, and so I'm looking forward to this talk and to interacting with you.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. So let's get started. I'm going to skip the slide that has information about me, and let's just jump right into the topic. So, of course, you know, most of you might already have a good idea of what behavioral economics. Some of you probably don't. So I'm going to start with a gentle introduction on what it is. So basically, traditional economics, which obviously, you know, it has been applied for many years, is based on the assumption that we human beings are very logical, are rational, and that of course, you know, when it comes to making decisions that are going to have an economic impact, we are very careful about how to do that. So, you know, economic theory is the way, you know, many aspects of how the economy is being handled worldwide is based on this assumption. However, it's not entirely so. I mean, what really happens is that, you know, people tend to be more irrational than rational, even if we try to be careful about not being irrational. Right? The truth of the matter is that our decisions are influenced by different factors. Some of them can be emotional. It can be just something that is temporary based on a social situation, or it can be biased. And there are a large number of different biases that influence the kind of decisions that we make. So behavioral economics has to do with, you know, how that actually influences the decisions that we make within the economic context. That's basically what it is. So, you know, as a means of introduction, I want to just mention a couple of aspects regarding systems thinking. And I like using a lot this metaphor, which is sound equalizer. So we all know what a sound equalizer is. We know what we want to achieve with the equalizer is to obtain a better quality of sound, be to be able to listen to the music as if we have the band or the orchestra right in front of us. It can also be used, of course, to create some, you know, well-intended distortions or changes to produce some kind of effect. But in the end, basically, the equalizer is a device that allows us to change, you know, the behavior or the sounds that are coming into the device compared to what we're actually going to be listening to. And to do that, then we have a set of dials that we move up or down to be able to get the desirable result. So if we extrapolate this and we consider not a sound equalizer, but say an organizational equalizer or a process equalizer or a team equalizer, where each level is a step in the process, a department on the organization, you know, etc., then we have a similar situation. I mean, what we would like to do is to be able to to handle the steps in the process of the different areas of the organization in a way that we get the best possible economic output. Nonetheless, what happens at most organizations is that there is this tendency to put everything all the way up. And the same way that with a sound equalizer, we get distortion when we do that, the sound is not really quite right. The same happens with an organization. In this case, what we have is economic flow. And when we do that, when we try to have everything working at maximum capacity, for example, we actually don't help the organization from the economic standpoint. We're actually making matters worse. So what we actually want to do is to make sure that each stage, each step, each area of the organization and the process is actually working at the right level so that the economic flow is the best possible, so that we get the best economic output. And of course, this changes over time. So that's an important aspect to take into account. And of course, Kanban is very useful to achieve this. Systems thinking also tells us that most of the time the problem is the system and not the person. And that in order to be able to change behavior, we can achieve it by changing the system, okay? So if we take all this into account and we start getting into, what it is that we want to achieve in the organization, so we have a stage. So one of them is we can be in an undesirable state and we might want to migrate into a preferable state, or we can be in a good state but we want to make it even better. So for example, these are actually two Kanban boards where this is actually for a large telecom, one of the 4 largest telecoms in the planet. And these boards are for the department that is in charge of figuring out new services for its customers. So basically each label that you see there is one new project that needs to be worked. There's just more than a few, there's actually quite a bit. And what basically is happening here is that the number of people that work at this department is nearly close to the number of labels that you see there. So basically what we were experiencing in this case is that everybody was way overworked. There were way too many projects. Actually, there are projects that are late up to 3 years, and so on. So obviously, this is not a desirable state. And what this shows is that the organization is just focusing on doing a lot of things, but not necessarily on satisfying customers and not necessarily on being financially healthy. So this is also an undesirable state, and this is what happens after the previous one. So on the previous one, they figure out what they would like to offer to customers, the new projects, and these are the projects that are actually being executed. So they are creating new services and new features and so on. And this is a department that has 4 areas, and the areas are in between the blue lanes, so each swim lane is a different department of this area. And each post-it is one project. And each post-it that has a red sticky on it is a project that is blocked. So as you can appreciate right away, there's a lot of them. There are actually 42. And most of them are on production and post-production, on pre-production and production. And of course, that doesn't mean that the problem is there. What that means is that that's when the impact is becoming evident. But obviously, the problems come way, way earlier. So a preferable state is something like this, right? So we want to have a fewer amount of work such that people are able to do things better. And the same with, with the other boards. So in this case, as I mentioned, the previous photo of this board had 42, and this one has 9, and only one is in the pre-production state. So we migrate from one state that is not really that nice to one that is better. It could definitely get even better than that. but basically we're on the right track. And that can also be reflected at the level of personal Kanban. So we can see, if we compare the two photos, the one on the left, we can see that the doing has actually 5 tasks, so it's actually exceeding the WIP limit, and 2 of those are blocked, whereas the one on the right is in a better state. So how can we apply behavioral economics to be able to achieve this? Behavioral economics has a lot of aspects behind it. There's a lot to be considered, and of course what we're going to be covering here is just a fraction of that. So I want to begin with ego depletion. And this is an experiment that actually I think will be really cool if you guys try it at work. What you can do is, and it might work actually nice when the amount of work that your teams are doing is between middle and high. And what you can do is, let's say you wait until the afternoon, probably 3, 4 p.m., and just put on a place that is easily visible and accessible to your team, put a plate with baby carrots and another one with chocolates or any other kind of candy. And observe what it is that the team starts consuming. And if they go more for the sweets, for the candies and the chocolates, rather than the baby carrots, that means that those people are actually on their ego depletion state. If they go for the baby carrot, that means they are not. So what does this mean? Well, what this means is that when your brain gets very saturated as a result of too much work, too much stress, multitasking, or any other kind of activity that tends to oversaturate your brain, the way your brain behaves changes to one of making decisions that are less logical, are less rational. Because obviously a baby carrot is something healthier. So if you want to eat something that is going to be good for you, obviously the baby carrot is a better option. But when you are depleted mentally, there's a tendency to just go for something that has a more immediate satisfaction appeal. So obviously putting something sweet in your mouth creates a higher satisfaction. Of course, in addition to that, there's more craving for sugar from the brain. But that's interesting. You see people stopping and kind of wondering which one to take. That means that they are actually evaluating the benefits of one over the other. And that also allows you to see if people are more or less impulsive. So from the standpoint of Kanban, how can we help our teams take longer to reach that state or to not reach it? And basically is by applying some of the practices of Kanban. So one of them is limiting WIP. If the WIP limits on your board, on portions of the board are high, then that is going to make it easier for people to start getting in that depletion state. Same thing with multitasking. So if at personal Kanban level, you help and your people get used to doing one thing at a time and doing probably 2 in an exception, then it is more difficult for them to also get the ego depletion. In addition to that, high visualization also helps with this, and this is because if you have a Kanban board where you only have, for example, to do, doing, and done, compare to having a Kanban board where you have some more detail, not too much detail, but you have more detail on what the process is or what is going on, people tend to get less depleted because there's a visual element that allows us to keep some discipline on the way they are doing their work. And of course, the number of hours that people work also influence if ego depletion is going to be an issue or not. And by the way, high visualization also allows to take care of information bias and anchoring bias. Information bias is when we tend to pay more attention to information that is more readily available. When you have a Kanban board, all the information, and hopefully if the Kanban board is done correctly, all the relevant information is there. Therefore, it's difficult to give more importance to irrelevant information over relevant information. And the anchoring bias, also what it does is it creates a tendency in the person on taking a piece of information that he or she received in an earlier time as the information that actually guides the decisions over the other information. So when you have this one Kanban board, it's harder to be able to fall into that trick. Okay. Then what we also have is what is known as the bandwagon effect. And the bandwagon effect occurs when you have a group of people and most of that people have one same opinion, independently of whether or not that opinion is correct or not. So this is more like, it's like what the masses try to influence. And the bandwagon effect is one of the reasons why meetings have a tendency to not be effective. You get a group of people in a room, and then somebody has some sort of opinion that creates an anchor, and everybody just takes on it and support it. There is for other people to also agree with that, even though it's not necessarily correct. So the way in which Kanban helps us reduce the bandwagon effect is through, well, some of the other practices of Kanban, such as classes of service. So instead of somebody coming with an opinion on what needs to be done on a specific situation on the process in a subjective way, and other people supporting it just because it sounds like a good idea, when we have classes of services, we have a well thought out discipline of behavior, based on information we have on the board. And also the classes of service motivate people to be disciplined as to how they're going to improve and mature the behavior based on what is on the board. And of course, together with that, on the explicit policies behind the classes of services or behind some of the portions of the board. And in addition to this, obviously having effective meetings. So we know that if we have a daily meeting where the meeting is based on the board, those meetings tend to be a lot shorter and a lot more effective because they focus exactly on what needs to be paid attention to on the board. So, and something that is also useful in terms of eliminate the bandwagon effect is what we have here. So in this case, what we have is one department that consists of 5 teams. And the original idea was board for the entire department, but at the same time, each team was in charge of different kinds of tasks, attending different customers, etc. So having one common board was going to be a nice visualization over what's happening for the department, but not necessarily useful or as useful as we could be if we had a dedicated board for each team. However, one concern was, well, then they're going to start drifting. So there's going to be like 5 independent separate teams under one common name, but there's really nothing. There's going to be communication problems in the way they interact and what has to do with the department. So what we created was, what I call the DNA of the department, and that's the photo on the upper left hand. And basically what we figured out what was the common denominator in terms of the board visualization for that department. And that was the point of departure for each team. However, each team had the freedom to mature its Kanban board in the way that will make them more effective, for as long as they respected that common denominator. And it's easy to recognize. If you look at the central part of the board, there's like a common theme, and that's what was utilized to be able to keep common communication across the entire department, and at the same time allow the things to be more effective. Within behavioral economics, there's also what is known as priming and anchoring. And priming is basically an association. Is when somebody says something or shows something to another person, and that exposure influences what the person is going to think or do next. And anchoring is a way to specify, say, a desirable value, or maybe it was undesirable, but the moment it was specified, it influences what the person is going to do or say. So, for example, if I say rain, then people are more prone to thinking based on that, to think about raincoats or cold or overcast and so on. So that has to do with priming. And anchoring will be, for example, if we say, okay, I think that this task is going to be really difficult. The moment I say that, I created an anchor, and people are going to have a tendency to think that that particular task or that project is going to require more effort and more time and so on, compared to saying, oh, this is a piece of cake. So we have to be careful with the language we use. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that, and as you all guys well know, Kanban, from the visual standpoint, the board is something that allows us to have an appreciation of what's going on. But the interpretation, the understanding, and the decisions is something that is not on the board. It's something that we have to do. We have to use the information that is being provided to then make the right interpretation, and then based on that, make decisions. So what this means is that then when we are interacting with customers, with the team, with other decision makers, we have to be careful as to how we phrase things out, so that we avoid bad priming, for example. And this table shows an example. So it's not the thing we say, oh wow, this is not going well, we need less defects. Compared to say, you know what, we're going to make the customer super happy with this one. That creates a different state of mind that motivates different behavior. So when we say we need less defects, basically what we are doing is we're giving permission for defects to actually happen. And in other words, what I'm telling my team is we are going to be reactive. Reactive behavior is okay. Whereas if I say, let's make our customer super happy, what I'm saying is we're going to focusing on making things right all the time, which means this is more a proactive approach. And a proactive approach is economically more sound than a reactive approach. And the same with all the other phrases that I have there. And of course, these are just examples of what can be used. Here's another experiment that you guys could also try out. And you can do it with cookies or ice cream or any other kind of goodie that you can think of. And basically what you can do is you can expose some people, or probably the same team. Like one day you bring like 12 or 20 different flavors of ice cream. I said, okay guys, let's just take a break, here's some ice cream, and just feel free to take any flavor you want. And then some other day you do something similar, but you bring only like 3 or 4 or 5 flavors. Just bring just a few. What you are going to observe is that people take longer to decide which flavor to pick when there's a very large number of options compared to when you have a few options. So what that means is that the decision takes less effort, it takes less time, but more importantly, what is reported is that people feel more satisfied with their choice when the number of choices was smaller rather than when it was a larger number of options. So this is an important lesson to learn, and what this means is that what we want to do is you want to have a Kanban board that is not too basic, such that it doesn't allow you to visualize the opportunities for improvement, but don't do it way too detailed, because then people get lost in it, and then it's difficult to figure out what to improve, where to improve, and so on. But that also goes in terms of, you know, the number of tasks that are going to happen, the number of features that you are going to consider, you know, when discussing with your customer. So basically, what you want to do is you want to make things simpler, easier, and you know, simplicity is beautiful. Koichi Kawana says that simplicity is the achievement of the maximum effect with the minimum means, and that's what we want to do. So obviously, if we have good WIP limits, and even more so if we have not only the upper limit, but also the lower WIP limit, we make it easier for our team to actually obtain a better value flow. The same thing with explicit policies. We want to have policies that are concise and that are very easy to understand and to apply, and that will also make it easier. There's also what is known as the 5 levels of Kanban, in which basically the first level has to do with starting locally, just internally, say within the team. Then the next level is when we influence the inputs and outputs from the Kanban standpoint. The next level is when we work at value chain level, and then the highest flight level is when we talk about applying this at organizational level. So this is actually a really nice strategy, because it allows us to start, you know, in a very simple and expand little by little as the effectiveness takes place. So limiting options is a good aspect to consider in order to be able to be more effective in the way we do, we generate value. There's also another interesting experiment, and you could try this out also, which is what is known as risk aversion. So I mentioned bias at the beginning of this talk. So this is what is known as zero risk bias. And what this basically tells us is that people have a tendency to overweight negative things or threats and try to underweight, you know, what is good, you know, the benefits. So here's an interesting question, and this actually is exactly the way Kahneman makes it, which is you have two options. One option is you can lose $900 for sure, or you have a 90% chance of losing 1,000. So which would you rather do? Which of those two options? These are the only ones, and you have to choose one. Which one would you choose? And what happens in this case is that people will have a tendency to go for the sure one. So, hey, of course, and if there is no doubt I'm going to make 900, even though 900 is less than 1,000, I'd rather go for that one. And not everybody chooses this, but the vast majority of people do. Another question will be, this is not changing, okay. So the other one is, okay, now you have two options. Either you lose $900 for sure, or you have only a 90% chance of losing $1,000. Which one would choose? And what happens is that most people, for this case, chooses the second one. Even though, you know, if we look both questions, they are basically the same. The only difference is that one has to do with winning and the other one has to do with losing. So what this means is that when we want to make a decision that has a dollar value behind it, or there's a monetary consequence as a result of that decision, we tend to think this way. So what this means is that we need to have an objective aid. And that objective aid is, for example, quantification. So if we have a way to quantify, we can visualize that quantification, which obviously allows us to do scientific management, then we're going to be able to make a more sound decision. And of course, we can do the quantification either manually or electronically. The advantage of doing it electronically is that we can get richer visualization, we can get more elements to be able to make a better decision. And that's why the quantification aspect of Kanban is so important. In all the instances with all the customers that I have worked with, it is very clear that those customers who choose not to use an electronic tool, either they use Maeda decisions based on impulse, which is biased, or they make very limited quantification, which obviously limits the richness of information to be able to make a better decision. And customers who use electronic tools, then they have vast amount of information that allows them to do this, and actually they can play with those numbers and play what-if scenarios to be able to make a better decision. So scientific management and quantification is extremely important to be able to make economic decisions. And there's also a couple of aspects that can be overcome. One of them is known as recency. And recency, what does is that when we get a piece of information, let's say we get a piece of information today, and then next week we get another piece of information, we are going to have a tendency to give more value to the information we got at that moment or more recently over the information that we got some time ago, even if the information that is older is actually more relevant or more valuable. So again, if we try to make a decision just based on that impression, the decision might not be the best one. So if we have the Kanban board, we have the visualization, and we have the quantification, then the information is a lot easier to see the information at their face value and not our impression over the value. And it also helps with the ostrich effect. And basically what this is when we have this tendency to ignore dangerous or negative information. And this is like when you say, oh, well, yeah, people have, accidents when riding their motorcycle on the highway, and, it's okay, you have a helmet, and there's less of a chance to get seriously injured. However, something that I noticed, as Mahesh said, I moved to Utah a little over a year ago after living in Silicon Valley 21 years. And over there, people who ride bicycles and motorcycles, they must wear a helmet. Over here is not necessary. So I see motorcycle riders on the highway going 80 miles an hour without a helmet. And why? Because they say, well, I'm a really good rider, so it's never going to happen to me. I am not going to get into an accident, and I'm not going to injure myself, so I'm not hitting my head. Therefore, I don't need a helmet. So basically, they are ignoring something that is very clear. If you are on a motorcycle on a highway, something happens, it's going to be ugly. So the same thing happens, when we're working on projects. Decision makers have a tendency to ignore certain kinds of dangerous or negative information for different reasons. But this is something that happens. And then we pay attention to it when it's late, when it's really having a high impact, when it's impossible to ignore it. So if we have, again, the visualization, the quantification, it is in front of us, is begging for attention, is evident, then the ostrich effect is overcome more easily. Now there's also the clustering illusion, and these are boards that I use a lot when I'm doing Kanban training. So I expose people to this. So let's look at the board on the left. Okay? And what I tell people is, okay, look at that board and tell me, is there a bottleneck? And most people, most of the times, immediately say, yes, there's a bottleneck, when actually there isn't. And then on the board on the right, in that case, yes, there's a bottleneck. But then I ask people then, why is there a bottleneck? And most people tend to immediately say, oh, because there's something wrong with the, external verification. And I ask them, really? I mean, could there be another reason? And after thinking and discussing it, people learn that there can be a large number of reasons, any of which or a combination of them being the reason for the bottleneck to be happening. So basically what this means is that the clustering illusion is where we have a tendency to see a pattern where there isn't. Okay? So we might have a tendency to think that there's a bottleneck here simply because we don't see like tickets on the done columns. But that doesn't mean there's a bottleneck. That doesn't mean things are not flowing. It just happens that at that particular point in time, things are being worked on and nothing is in the done state. But that doesn't mean there's a bottleneck. And on the second board, the bottleneck, yes, effectively could have to do with the external verification. But it could have to do with any of the other columns. It could have to do with one or more whips, or it could be just a temporary state that is going to last only 10 minutes or half an hour. So jumping into conclusion and doing a change at that moment for something that is a temporary state is a bad decision. And why did that happen? Because we jumped to the conclusion that there was a pattern that is known and that there's an action that needs to be taken based on that pattern. So we have to be very careful. What that means is, again, Kanban gives us the visualization, but we have to make the right interpretation. We have to think carefully before we make a decision. So we need, most times, we need extra information. We might need to ask some questions and so on to be able to make the right decision. So we have to be very careful with the clustering illusion. And there's this other behavior, which is non-instant availability. So again, here in this board, what we see is that probably these tickets on the internal verification is not flowing because the resources in external verification are not available. So this could be that case, but maybe not. So again, we have to be very careful because the action behind the conclusion that we come to can have a very good positive economic effect, or it can make matters worse. So be very careful with the clustering illusion. And then just to to finalize and to just some honorific mentions, so to speak, is that Kanban has also take care of a kind of bias, such as confirmation bias, which is when we try to interpret a piece of information to our own advantage, or the status quo bias, which is people who are afraid of change or who resist change or who need a lot of convincing to accept a change are people who are biased by status quo. There's a lot of folks say, well, if it's working, if it isn't broken, then don't fix it, right? Well, not necessarily, because we don't want something that just works. We want things that to be better, right? Negative bias has to do with people who are always just looking at the negative side of things, And the unit bias is when we think that one size fits all. And I don't mean to be mean, but Scrum in its origin and in its foundation had a lot of unit bias. That's why we have the sprint backlog, which is just like one whip to be executed during the throughout the sprint and so on. Fortunately, Kanban, the Scrum has been maturing in a way that those things are disappearing little by little, and that's really nice, and it's good that that's happening. And Scrum has good things, obviously, but this is one aspect that wasn't helping much. So in the case of Kanban, fortunately, this one-size-fits-all doesn't happen the moment we have, for example, weight limits. Okay, so now why is it important, and what my invitation is? If you learn about behavioral economics, and these and other biases that are considered there, you're going to be able to see more in depth, to have a richer amount of interpretation, and to make better decisions over the information that the Kanban board is providing to you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, but thank you, Masa. This is fascinating discussion, fascinating presentation. Just a reminder to all the folks on the webinar, if you have questions for Masa, please go ahead and get those on the Q&A. The questions, I think it's called, the questions window on the right side of your screens. Masa, I want to admit to guilt here that I think ever since I turned 40, I think I've been on an ego depletion state. I would always choose the chocolates over the baby carrots. When I was a kid, I didn't eat so much chocolate, but after 40, bam, it was like my sweet tooth had just sort of exploded. So now that you told me, I can rest sort of, I can sit back and relax. I know what my condition is. Great concepts, Masa. So let me start off by asking you a question. That in your experience, in the way that you've seen different teams around the different parts of the world work with Kanban and implement Kanban, which of these do you see most in play? Do you think that some of the biases, some of the effects that you talked about are more prominent than the others, and then how does that impact the Kanban journey in terms of the evolution of the board design, evolution of the policies? Is it important for people to maybe understand the whole subject of behavioral economics before they, or as they're embarking on their Kanban journey? How do they sort of become more cognizant of this phenomenon and be more effective in their Kanban systems design and in working with Kanban?
Okay, thank you. Well, so what I summarized in this presentation, I think is a really good starting point, because this is more easily, readily, and directly applicable. So I will say that, this is probably a good starting point. You don't have to get in depth into learning about behavioral economics and everything that it encompasses, because it's a lot, and it takes quite a bit of time to be able to have a good level of domain over it. So if we take the set that I presented here, I think this is a good starting point. Some of them are more applicable towards the team, the ones that have more direct implication on the board. But then the other ones are more focused towards the decision maker. So for example, at the beginning of the presentation, let me try to go back here. So for example, so what happened here with this board, which was the initial, where there was just too much information, too much work to do for the teams, and also on this board. And actually, you can see the weight limits there. Look at the one in the middle that has a 48 weight limit, for example. It was insane. It was a lot. But what happened with this particular instance was that, my initial effort was to figure out a reasonable weight limit and start working that way. Of course, the behavior that was going to come from that is that things were going to slow down in terms of the inputs. The new work that was being pushed to these teams was going to come to a halt in order to then improve flow and then be able to work those inputs. However, because of the culture of this company, that was going to be a deal breaker, because the directors were simply not going to accept that. So what I decided to do was, okay, let's put some WIP limits. Let's start working as we are working now. Nothing changes. But what we're going to do is we're going to be able to visualize, and we're going to be able to quantify how horrible things are. So we obviously, I started increasing WIP limits just to be able to allow some of these. And then eventually I told teams, you know what, don't worry. If the WIP limit is exceeded, just go for it. So ignore the WIP limit. Just keep on working the way you have been working all these years. And what this did is that this allowed us to be able to create a quantification and be able to show the economic impact to the decision makers, to the directors. And it was then when they say, wow, are things this bad? And say, well, they are actually worse. This is what we have been able to quantify up to this point. So basically, once they saw the impact this was having, is when they say, okay, then you can start doing changes. And it's when improvement happened. So basically what I realized is that it was not just a matter of implementing Kanban and forcing people to comply with the policies and the classes of service and everything. It was, there's a human aspect in play that is way more important that I need to work on. And that was because, there were biases from the decision makers that have to do with, with some of what I mentioned here, which in part was a little bit of the one-on effect, the priming and anchoring they were having, and also risk aversion. So there were certain aspects there. So I needed to make it clear to them. So basically, the Kanban implementation for that organization didn't begin with setting, Kanban and beginning to improve. The first step was we had to make very clear, very visible, very evident the pain that everybody's going to and the negative economic impact this is having.
Got it. Excellent. Let me get on to a couple of audience questions. There's a question from Jim Tessier. He said, when you use the words priming and anchoring, are you using neuro-linguistic programming, NLP terms?
Yeah, I mean, if you have knowledge of neuro-linguistics of NLP, by all means, yes, it's even more effective when you do that.
Okay. There's a question from Warren Sinzon, I think. I hope I'm pronunciation right. He said, you said Scrum has unit bias. Was my understanding correct that sprint length is unit biased?
Yes. So the fact of saying that we have, the sprint is a fixed length, the fact that you have only one WIP, and that WIP, also, even though it changes from one sprint to the next, the fact that you have sprint backlog, that's one and only one WIP limit for everything that's happening. So that actually limits the effectiveness of the value flow. And early Scrum boards had only to do doing and done. And basically what they were assuming is that the team is self-organized, and they are going to be able to figure out how to do things because they are very smart, they are really good at what they do, they'll figure it out so they can do it. And yes, I don't contest that. I agree that we have great people and that they can figure it out. However, if we increase the visualization and we are disciplined, sort of like what Kanban offers, then we're helping them more easily improve. And when we have more than one WIP limit, we also improve flow, and then and also now, and there are many implementations of Scrum where they have now sets of sprints. They have more like a cadence. So it's certain maturity of Scrum resembles aspects of Kanban. So I'm glad to see that there's that acknowledgement in that, it needs to mature and that it has been maturing.
Right. Great. Another question, which is where the question I myself have. So when you know that these are the kinds of behaviors and biases exist, in the continuous evolution. This is a question from Sudipta. In the continuous evolutionary model, since we move continuously with small incremental steps, can we assume that even if these biases play into the Kanban system design, they will soon be corrected by the team once they see that there is a problem, and therefore may or may not be influenced by the bias after they've acknowledged the problem?
So, so some of that behavior can be identified and acknowledged, but not necessarily all the behaviors. So when you have a foundation like this at hand, and as the organization also becomes knowledgeable of it, you're going to be able to more rapidly and more effectively go about doing these changes. But yes, I agree. I mean, there are baby steps, so we have to go little by little and continuously. And also there is something important. When you have knowledge of this, you are more aware. Because this is not something I say, oh, okay, I was able to overcome this particular bias, and it's never ever going to happen again. That actually doesn't happen. We have a natural tendency to these biases tend to naturally govern over our decisions. So we have to make conscious efforts, maybe not all the time, but continuously, and at different times. We might have to say, wait a second, I am about to make a decision because I'm doing this, right? Or so basically what this means is you may have to stop and think for a few more seconds or a few more minutes at different times, and it happens to everybody. Two leading figures of these are Kahneman and Ariely, and there's actually a very famous interview that was made to Ariely. He himself says, you know what, I mean, I have dedicated my life to this, and every now and then I fall victim of this. So I have to stop and consciously make sure that I'm not doing it.
Right. So do you see a pattern? Do you see teams doing this, doing retrospectives or other types of meetings where they sort of sit back and say, okay, where are the problems, where are the issues? Or is it based on each team's own sort of maturity and consciousness?
Yes. I mean, it's once we learn this, we start seeing it everywhere. I mean, it's very, and that's actually a bias, by the way. But the point is that we start realizing about behaviors that we didn't see before, that we thought it was okay or it was natural, and then we say, oh, wait a second, what is this? And we see it happening very frequently everywhere. So again, this is a very powerful tool because it's going to allow us to, to make it more difficult to make the wrong decision. Okay.
Right. A couple of other questions. I know we're getting to the top of the hour, but or rather the bottom of the hour. But let me go ahead and get these questions in as well. The question from Annette Delbo. She asks, can you elaborate on the flight levels that you talked about?
Elaborate on what, I'm sorry?
The flight levels. You talked about flight levels in Kanban.
Oh, the flight levels, okay. So, I forgot the name of the person who proposed the flight levels. There's actually, he wrote an article and he presented at one of the Kanban conferences. I think it was Leopold, the person who proposed the flight levels of Kanban. So basically, I'm sorry?
Klaus Leopold?
Yeah. So basically, what this means is in which way you can scale Kanban, right? And what he proposes is, you know what, I mean, it's very nice to be able to apply Kanban at a high level and at scale and so on, but let's take it one step at a time. So let's begin small. So let's begin doing Kanban just locally, just us, okay, internally, so that we don't have to worry about having to convince or influence anybody outside us. Let's begin just us, and that's the first level. That's flight level 1. So basically what it says is we're doing things internally, but we're still having to deal with the same inputs and outputs. You know, the way the organization has been working still works that way, and we have to bear with it. The second flight level is influence that. So now we're going to be able to work on improving the interface between us and what surrounds us. Then the third level is now we're going to apply this across all the departments across the value chain. Okay, and then the highest level is now we can expand this to do it at organizational level. So it's a gentle way to be able to be maturing, and of course it has the advantage that you already have a good Kanban practice inside. Not only you're getting more efficient and more effective, but then you can more easily influence the interfaces because people already saw that you are doing things in a much better way, and so on. So it's just a natural growth. Right. And the article is actually very nice. I mean, I invite you guys to look it up. It's actually the Kanban flight levels. It's a really good thing. And if I remember correctly, Mike Burroughs' book on the human side of Kanban also mentions the flight levels.
Okay. In fact, so since you mentioned the book, Jim Tessier had a question earlier about what is your favorite Kanban book? Do you have any recommendations there?
Well, I really don't have any. I don't have a favorite. But what I will say is that I mean, what I always recommend is if you want to start with Kanban, you want to have a good foundation on Kanban, there are 2 books to read. One of them is obviously David Anderson's book, that's the Bible, and Mike Burroughs' book. However, I will recommend to read Mike Burroughs' book first and then David Anderson's book for the simple reason that David Anderson's book was published several years ago, and it hasn't been updated. And Kanban has matured, right? And it continues to mature. So his book doesn't reflect the maturity. So if you begin with Mike Burroughs' book, that's a more current one that gives you a good, a good foundation, and then you go to the Bible. So you want to put it in a way. I don't mean to sound religious. I'm not, but I don't mean to sound that. It's just that that's the book, so to speak. So it will give you a lot of foundation, but it won't give you, the state of the art. So the 2 of them make a good, starting point.
Right. I had one question which was related to one of the things that you talked about, the risk aversion of the
Oh, sorry, Mahesh. Let me just interrupt you for a second. I will also definitely recommend Jim Benson's book, even though it's not a book it's not Kanban as we use it typically. It's personal Kanban. That book is definitely a must.
The personal Kanban book, right?
Yes, personal Kanban. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So I had one last question. I don't believe that there is any other question that is there. That is about the zero risk bias, and you talked about the fact that people tend to overweigh the negatives and underweigh the positive feedback that they get. So in the context of Kanban tools and the typical metrics that you see in a tool like SwiftKanban, are there certain metrics that you consider to be those that give a negative feedback, a negative bias, and sort of reiterate that? And so are there certain metrics that one should focus on more than the others?
Well, it's actually contextual, right? what you can see, but the when you see the flow efficiency and the cycle time analysis, those two metrics are actually fairly good for that, because you can see, for example, here, in this particular image here, you can see the blockage, and you can see how there were a lot of blocked tasks, and then you can see how that starts impacting, the time it takes to get things done. And then as you start taking care of the blockage, then things begin to improve. So the good lesson to learn here, which is something good to show to decision makers, is what would have happened if we had been more careful, not only in deciding which features, but also on defining them. Right. So there will be less and there will be better, right? So then there's more value, for example. So, but again, it's circumstantial. You have to determine based on what's going on, then what you need to use. But the flow efficiency and cycle time are very good ones for that. Okay, right. So there's the blocking analysis as well, but these ones show you more the behavior per se.
Excellent. Masa, thank you very much for a great talk. I think there's a lot for people to think about and chew on, and to go back to their teams and systems, Kanban systems, and to reflect on everything they talked about. Fascinating talk as always, and good to always get together with you. I wanted to ask you one question. When is your book coming out?
Before the end of the year, definitely. It's actually going on the revision and editing right now. So
fantastic.
Yes, it's almost there.
You want to tell everyone here what the name of the book is going to be finally?
Sure. Let me think if I jump here. So is a serious leap. That's the name of the book, and basically it's a model that I developed. It's an integration model that puts together mindset. So for example, we talked a little bit about system thinking. So it integrates mindset, it integrates the human aspect, which has to do a lot with behavioral economics and organizational behavior, and then methodologies, Kanban included, and high collaboration frameworks, which is something that is probably better known as serious games. So basically it's an integration model where I show how we have been able to successfully put all these elements together to be able to make organizations more successful.
Great. Great. So with that, we come to the conclusion of this webinar. I'm going to just share our contact information on just so that you all have that. Here you go. Thank you all to all of the people who attended the webinar and stayed through the end to listen to the Q&A session. And I hope that you really were able to benefit from the talk by Masa, and of course I'm sure there's a lot of food for thought to all of you. If you're interested to connect with Masa after this talk and discuss with him more in depth, most welcome to do that. And if you would like to take a look at SwiftKanban or to talk to us about tooling, do get in touch with us or go to our website for a free trial that's available on the website. With that, I'd like to once again thank you, Masa, for this great talk, and I hope that we can get there again in the future for another one.
Oh, thanks again to everybody for being here, and thank you so much, Mahesh and SwiftKanban, for the opportunity to do this. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Have a great day, everyone.